The Spinoff Podcast Network.
K-pop to me means more than just listening to music. It's learning to be myself.
The Spinoff's new documentary, K-Pollies, follows 3 Pacific youth obsessed with K-pop. In a one-off documentary, see what they've found in Korean pop culture and how they bridge it with their own.
When you start dressing, looking different, everyone side-eyes you. But in K-pop, they're just like, no, like celebrate yourself.
Watch K-Pollies today at thespinoff.co.nz/videos. Made with the support of New Zealand On Air. You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is brought to you by SparkLab, offering inspiration and practical advice to help businesses find their edge. To hear more about SparkLab, including details about the latest events, workshops, and business tools, visit sparklab.co.nz. And now, here's your host, Simon Pound.
You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is made by the Spinoff with help from Callaghan Innovation, New Zealand's innovation agency. Here's your host, Simon Pound.
Everyone will be familiar with the way that skincare companies can use science to sell their products. But how many people actually trust that the science is anything more than marketing? Well, often it really isn't. Today we're talking to a person who worked out that most were just selling hope in a jar and set out to change that. Soraya Hendesi came to New Zealand as a trained cosmetician with a plan to make skincare that would actually work. This led to years of new research with partners like the University of Auckland and Callaghan Innovation, and the discovery of active agents that pass the gold standard of clinical trials, leading to skincare that actually works. Soraya's company uses natural materials and has its own plantation north of Auckland that fosters native plants long known and used for their properties, and by matching these with rigorous R&D, turned her company Snowberry into an international force, attracting the attention of Procter and Gamble, one of the world's biggest cosmetic companies, who bought them last year. Soraya and her husband Mark still run the company here, and to talk the journey, the sale, and what's next, Soraya joins us now. Kia ora, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. Hello.
Hey, so tell me, where did your interest in skincare first come from?
I think it came from my childhood. As a child, I spent many hours in our Persian fragrant garden making beauty potions for my mother and grandmother, who were at the time working for UNICEF. My mother, an amazingly elegant lady, she opened my eyes to the world of beauty brands. And as I grew older, I became more and more interested in that world. And we moved to England and then Spain. And I spent many hours as I was studying in department stores, searching for that amazing skincare that I never found. And one of the fondest memories I have is a friend told me there is a lady who's opened a shop in Brighton selling cosmetics that does not test on animals. And I thought that was a really cool idea because no one ever thought of innocent animals until then. And I became Anita Roddick's, one of the first customers of Anita Roddick in Brighton. And I really admire her starting that business, which was quite novel.
Was that the first body shop?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, in Brighton. And the world became my university. I visited many exhibitions. I lived and traveled in many countries. And I just made contact with people in the beauty industry because I knew what I wanted wasn't going to happen just by itself. I needed to make contact with experts in different fields of beauty, science, marketing, branding, packaging. So it was kind of putting a jigsaw puzzle together.
What was the kind of insight that led you? So you were working as a cosmetician or trained as a cosmetician?
Well, I did later on when I was studying. Of course, I was doing different subjects in college, maths, physics, whatever. But then I realized that what I should be pursuing is beauty. And I decided to study to become a cosmetician to pave the way to create that skincare. I never intended to practice as a cosmetician, but it really opened my eyes, and made me more familiar. And, of course, it's been very, very helpful.
Because it's kind of wild how many of the ingredients and the things that people use regularly in their kind of, beauty or grooming main regimes actually are full of petrol, harmful chemicals, and a kind of could only do the opposite of what people are hoping they will do.
Unfortunately, yes. Unfortunately, that is true. And I'm amazed even because I'm a customer myself. And that is, that led to me, that idea of, this original idea of Snowberry came to me, even though I was adamant that I was dreaming of having the most amazing skincare brand. But then there came a time when I thought, well, I cannot find a skincare that I could trust 100% because the scientific ones didn't have the they were full of chemicals I didn't want, and the natural ones, even though they sounded nice, they were not effective enough. And I found a lot of ingredients in a lot of supposedly anti-aging products that were not only not effective but very harmful.
And there's this wonderful thing where so much of the marketing in the industry, I've seen you describe it as hope in a jar before.
Yes.
This idea where they will say, we've got this active ingredient and it's in the eye cream or the moisturizer or whatever. It's such a low level that it could never actually have any effect unless you had 100 jars on you. And then if you did, then the dilution of that would mean it would never have any effect anyway.
That's right. I was never interested in market fluff, like stories that we hear over and over again. For example, one would say, I don't know, we've found this new ingredient extracted from a very rare orchid that grows once in a millennium behind the impossible mountain. That I'm not interested in that. All I want is radiant skin.
How do you go about, so you had that ambition and you'd studied and trained. How do you go about actually injecting some science into the natural space? Like, what are the steps you take? Because I imagine, it sounds to me, the process you took of studies with Auckland University and the like, prior to even having revenue. How do you do that from a business point of view?
Well, from a business point of view, there has to be a lot of sacrifice, resilience, patience. Science is a risky business. If you want to get into science, create a product that has some science, you have to take the plunge. We did a lot of restructuring. We did because when the business started forming, it wasn't based upon only my dream. It had to be serious business. And we decided to put all our investments into 4.5 years of University of Auckland, scientific trial and research. And after 4.5 years, when we saw, because we were looking for this technology that could prove that the peptides actually travel through the cellular matrix, and no one has ever proved it before. And we weren't scared because we were after real science.
Tell me what peptides are and what led you to be investigating those as the agent that would
Yes,
that would stand
peptides
out
are
for you.
short proteins that exist in our skin, but as we age, unfortunately, they diminish. And if you have peptides in any cream, topical cream, it won't penetrate through the pores of your skin because skin is quite, it is supposed to be protecting you from pathogens and viruses and bacteria, so it won't easily penetrate to the skin. To prove that it does, you need a special skill and technology. And it took 4.5 years for that to be proven. And after 4.5 years, we had to give it to an institute in Europe to do the one and only gold standard clinical trial to say, yes, it's working.
Tell me about the process of doing this. So you set up the company, and so with your husband, who tell me about how you came to be doing this in New Zealand with the University of Auckland.
Well, as I said, I've always been wanting, even if I had ended up in Kathmandu, I would have done some sort of skincare. But I feel very fortunate that this beautiful country is my base now. And well, of course, I fell in love with a New Zealander, amazing man. And he was in another business, and I've always been telling him, I was very interested in beauty and skincare, and he kept telling me when he was in another industry, I believe in necessity. I said, well, beauty is necessity. What is more real than, having radiant skin and feeling good about yourself? The life is about feeling good. And so when we came to New Zealand in 2002, I said, well, this is it. I'm going to start. And he decided to do it with me. And it became, and I knew by then, who were the best marketing people, branding people. I had some idea where to go for science. And one thing led to another. And it became real business. It wasn't only a dream, as I mentioned. And they did a research, and they said, yes, it's an amazing, idea, because no one until now has thought about not only quality, but also as natural as possible and real science. It didn't exist. They did a worldwide search, and they realized that it didn't exist. And we started doing it. But then the recession hit, which was amazing. And our launch market was Germany, so we had to do a few restructuring, came back to New Zealand, and we got into contract manufacturing, then decided no, we have to stick with our own brand, and that is when we put all our efforts, stopped all the marketing campaigns, and started all our efforts on science.
And at the stage that you and your husband decided to throw in and go full on this, had you ever sold any products? Had you ever made a moisturizer or a product and sold it?
Yes. You mean from day one before we started?
Yeah.
Of course. I tried to because I knew if I wanted to do something of this caliber, I need an substantial amount of investment as well as a good team behind me. But until then, while I was waiting, I created the most amazing cleansing bar, because we went and lived in many countries, and I followed my husband, and I just took that cleansing bar, repackaged it to suit the market. One of them was Abu Dhabi, Dubai, United Arab Emirates. And I think that was an amazing experience. I sold some in New Zealand as well, which was good, And then there were a lot of demands for the VIP rooms for different hotels, upmarket hotels in the Middle East, which was great. And then we had to come back here to New Zealand. And I thought, this is it. I have to start the brand.
Tell me about the process of getting that initial support and partnering with someone like Auckland University. Like, how do you go through making that happen?
Well, it is quite an involved, and you have to be really serious about what you want, because you have to take the risk, as I mentioned. You don't know how long it will take. Science can never tell you until you see result. And we were very grateful that we got the backing of Callaghan Innovation. And we got a science team in Auckland University and funded the thesis of actually our young scientist then, who is quite experienced now, Dr. Badenhorst. His team, they worked for 4.5 years on this technology. And it was, a process of, every day we were anxiously waiting. Of course, it took 1.5 years, but it was very worthwhile.
And at that same time, the decision to get some land north of Auckland and plant out your own trees and plants to be your produce. What kind of things did you uncover there with New Zealand native plants?
Yes, we've always known that Maori medicine was quite. We had a lot of respect for Maori ancient medicine, and we planted New Zealand natives because, of course, we are always from day one very environmentally friendly. In fact, as far as we know, Snowberry is the world's first skincare brand to be accredited carbon zero for every single product sitting on any shelf in the world. There were other brands who were carbon zero as a company, but not for every single individual product sitting on any shelf in the world. And of course, that gave us, we planted 9,000 indigenous plants from young plants, and they are now big, beautiful, it's a native forest. And we've extracted the beautiful harakiki seed oil that we use in our body oil. And we've used different, ingredients. We do have a biodiscovery lab, which we do constant research with native extracts. And apart from that, it was actually, of course, close to our heart because we knew that we are not adding to, carbon emissions. We offset our carbon emissions. So it was quite an amazing part of our story.
And what was the reaction when, after 4.5 years of funding some, very expensive and high-risk science, and then you send it off to Germany to do the clinical trial, which, had no guarantee of working, and then that came back as being effective, that your discovery was effective. How did that kind of, how did that feel? And then what did you do next to turn that intellectual property you generated into an international product?
Well, the word in the scientific world travels fast because once we proved with the gold standard clinical trial that this is effective and yes, it is working, we heard from the World Congress of Dermatology, that is the biggest dermatology conference in the world, and as the only serum to be presented in that congress, which was amazing. And of course, right after that, we heard from different international companies, which was amazing feeling because we thought, well, thousands of dermatologists were deprived of a technology so far. That meant a lot. And of course, right after that, the sales went up, and the rest is history.
What were those big companies saying? Were they kind of, making friends and sniffing out kind of to see how big your operations were?
Yes. In fact, one of the biggest in the world contacted us immediately after the conference. We talked about it, and then one after the other. But what really, really surprised me was that we spoke to many New Zealand investors, and no one was interested. I think they didn't take the power of beauty seriously. But then of course, when P&G came along and we talked about it, we found that our values are the same. They are very customer focused. They are environmentally friendly, and they have the amazing infrastructure and scientific capability behind them to make Snowberry a truly global and authentic skincare.
How much investment, and was the investment not local, that went into it over the years? That's really interesting, you saying that local investors didn't really understand beauty, as we've had other entrepreneurs on the show like Janine Crossan from Flossie saying that so many of the investment decision makers are men who just don't even understand it in the first instance.
Yes, that's true. I think I don't talk about certain gender. I think generally speaking, they think there is this misconception that if you talk about rocket science, that's the only, serious science. Or I don't know what it is, but they didn't take beauty seriously. It's my personal feeling. But what I knew, because I read about it all my life, in that industry, I read about the history of different products and brands. And one interesting story is about during the Second World War, Yardley, I believe it was Yardley, did an amazing campaign saying that being unkept and if you don't look after your beauty is like giving in to enemy. And British women started quickly looking after themselves and used that brand. And today, if you go to the British War Museum, alongside the tanks and guns are those skincare. That shows you how important it is.
And even just the market size, like Procter and Gamble are a huge company.
Yes.
The size of, you'd think that investment would be able to just look at size of market, innovation in product, be able to make a cost benefit off that. But I guess people, want to kind of support what they know. And what kind of things has this meant for the local beauty industry to have this kind of international acclamation, and also with Trilogy, with the recent international purchase? I guess the more successes you have, the more that can then feed into the future of the industry.
You mean for different the industry?
Yes.
Yes, actually, I think one of the things that defines success is to be able to contribute to that industry. And yes, I have been always passionate about making New Zealand, the name of New Zealand on the beauty industry map of the world, alongside others like France or other countries that are up there. And we deserve to be up there because we should be clean, green New Zealand. And I know for a fact that New Zealand is one of the least corrupt countries in the world. And we've got this amazing, nature here. And also people here are quite I find entrepreneurial. So if I've contributed to that name, I will be very happy.
What does selling to Procter & Gamble mean, as you've kept operations here, and what does it then allow you to do, or what was it that guided you towards doing that?
Well, ever since the Snowberry was bought out, we have worked as before. The business is as usual. That is the beauty of this deal. Of course, we have the most amazing, capability in terms of, marketing, science, which has always been very important. And I guess if I wanted to go to the moon, I would have had to run to NASA. And Procter & Gamble is the NASA of the beauty world. So that has helped immensely. And I had a bittersweet experience after the sale, but, I'm very happy that Snowberry is in very good hands.
Yeah, how was it always the plan to grow it to a size and sell it, or does it just allow you to get the ethos and the products further?
As far as I'm concerned, I didn't know. I wasn't sure whether it would one day. I guess deep in my heart, I knew that if it was sold, it would have been a company like Procter and Gamble. But I would have, also if we never sold and it became really successful, it stayed in the family, it would have been fantastic. But also this, how it turned out, is also, for me, is amazing. So.
Did people tell you that it wouldn't work, or that it was too ambitious, or that it couldn't be done?
Or that I was mad?
Or that you were mad to try it?
All the time. All the time. In fact, someone told me one day, "Oh, Soraya, you're just dreaming." To which I answered, "Didn't every reality start with a dream?" I think you've got to have a certain amount of madness to take a risk.
And how does it feel to look at it now when you see it on the counters of the world's great kind of stores and, the places that you would have visited when you were researching it over those years, and alongside the products that were kind of the heroes that you had?
Oh, it's amazing. I think it's fantastic. And it will be. I think, if, and I'm happy that, as I mentioned, I'm pretty sure that Procter and Gamble would do a good job of keeping it as authentic as possible, because I don't want to be sitting in the shelf around the world being promising hope in a jar like the rest. I like to be Snowberry to be as authentic as possible. So when I see that, it makes me immensely happy.
What advice do you give to people who have a big dream?
I would say that do what you really love doing. Be patient and have a lot of resilience, because you have to be resilient. But one thing that's very important is fasten your seatbelt, because the ride is rough.
How do you define success?
I think success is being happy that you've done what you intended to do the best you can. And when you have done your job, if you've done a difference in that industry you worked in, that is true happiness.
That's so cool. Well, thank you so much, Soraya Hendesi, the founder of Snowberry. Thank you for joining us today, for sharing your story.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Wonderful. And thank you very much, Tina Tiller, for producing. And thank you very much for having us along and listening.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Business is Boring, presented by Simon Pound. And brought to you by the Spinoff and Callaghan Innovation.
From the Spinoff Podcast Network, that was Business is Boring, brought to you by SparkLab. Make sure you're following Business is Boring wherever you get your podcasts. And for more information on SparkLab, visit sparklab.co.nz. Ready to rediscover the joys of cycling? With over 300 kilometres of cycle paths across Tamaki Makaurau, jumping on your bike and going for a ride is such a fun way to discover the city from a different perspective. Cycling is getting more and more popular across Auckland, so now's a great time to join the hype and give cycling a go. Head to at.govt/cycling to find your nearest cycleway today. The Spinoff Podcast Network.